This originated from a prompt on the Fixing Movies subreddit, where the challenge was to pitch 9 X-Men movies adapting what Chris Claremont wrote as presented in the Ed Piskor Grand Design trilogy. This wouldn't exactly be that, but I think in spirit it's pretty close. The Grand Design book started out very faithfully translating what happened in the X-Men comics and went in a very different direction the further they went, which is what I would be doing here, but very differently. What Claremont excelled at was the focus on the X-Men as people just as much as the superhero adventure stuff. I'd want to lean into the X-Men as a character piece, with each movie focusing on a different character. 80% character interactions, 20% punching and explosions. Movie 1, Professor Xavier's point of view. This one would be about Professor X considering what his dream means to everyone else. Was he wrong to steal the childhood years of the first class so they could risk their lives for his dream? Did he do more harm than good by helping them to control their powers so they're not a risk to others or themselves and mutants at large by risking public outrage if Bobby accidentally freezes a dude when he shakes his hand? What prompts Professor X reconsidering his life's work would be the double whammy of 4/5 of his original students deciding to pursue lives away from the X-Men, and then Thunderbird dying fighting Count Nefaria. At the end, Xavier understands that the X-Men all chose to join him, and his first students chose to live normal lives because that's what his dream is all about. Mutants living the lives they want in the human world. He will soften a little by the movie's end, not being so much the strict disciplinarian he was years earlier, and being more of a friend to his new class of X-Men. Movie 2, Jean's point of view. They've already tried to do the Dark Phoenix saga twice, and each time they tried to shove it all in one movie and suffered for it. But I would want to start with Jean emerging from the water screaming, "I am fire, I am life, I am Phoenix," and in the movie with her and Scott on the moon, and she sacrifices herself. The themes line up with the themes of the previous movie, with Jean wondering if absolute power really does corrupt absolutely, and if not, what should her limits be now that she's basically a god? Is it selfish of her to try to build a normal life with a man she might outlive 100 times over? Is it really so bad for her to change Carmen Pryde's attitude toward Xavier and his school if the alternative is leaving him alone to send Kitty to Emma Frost's school? While a big undercurrent of this would be Jean losing touch with her humanity as she explores her new self, I would want to lean heavily into the Scott-Jean romance. In the comics, Scott didn't really commit to being Jean's boyfriend until after she nearly died in a Star Corps mission, so this would be two high school sweethearts finally getting together at the worst possible time. And of course, Jean realizes she's a danger to Scott, and the Shi'ar might destroy all of Earth to keep the threat of the Phoenix from doing any more damage. So she needs to die so Scott, her family, and the X-Men can all live. Movie 3, Kitty Pryde's point of view. Basically replicate the sense of wonder from the Harry Potter movies, of a normal kid going to a weird school where lots of weird stuff happens. On Kitty's second week of school, an Ingarai demon nearly kills her, and we see how resourceful this normal kid can be when the chips are down. Then you do the Days of Future Past story. In the comics, Kitty versus the demon came after Days of Future Past, but I'd flip it so we can get a hint of Kitty being the awesome action hero, and then see it fully realized with Kate Pryde in the future. Also, a really small change, but I would include Rogue as part of Mystique's brotherhood at this point. In a comic, she wasn't introduced until later, but it would be nice to see her for later movies. While this would be more story heavy than the previous two, I would want to dig into Kitty as a character. Following the Days of Future Past mission, she actually quits the X-Men because in such a short amount of time, she's nearly died twice, and she doesn't want that kind of life. But she does have bits and pieces of Kate Pryde's memories of the future, and she knows that Kate would die to protect her X-Men, and Kitty can't help but feel she is abandoning people who may need her, just as much as she needs them, since her powers are still out of control, and she is still getting the headaches. So she goes back to fully commit to being an X-Men at the end of the movie. Movie 4, Colossus's point of view. Open the movie with Peter waking up from a nightmare, remembering how he had to murder Proteus to save the world. We've seen how the X-Men is a positive thing for mutants around the world, and specifically for the X-Men, but we haven't touched on how it can be a negative thing, with the exception of Thunderbird's death. Poor Peter's life was completely ruined by being in the X-Men, so I would want some serious brooding here. The superhero action can be the Brood saga, no pun intended. Peter is not only grappling with the fact that he killed a man not too long ago, but now he's in space remembering how his brother died in a mission to space when he was a kid. The Brood are some of the most terrifying villains in the Marvel Universe, so having to deal with body horror stuff and the possibility that Peter might have to kill again, this time somebody he loves like a brother or sister, that messes with Peter. When the movie ends, Peter quits the X-Men for good, returning to the life of a farmer or an artist. This would be our first major departure from what happened in the comics, but I can't bear to see Peter lose his sister, then lose his memories and have a decent civilian life, only to get thrown back into the X-Men and eventually choose death to save his species from a deadly virus. I want him to be happy. Movie 5. Magneto is making the old college try at reforming and trying Xavier's way. In the comics, it was weird to me barreling through Uncanny X-Men at a breakneck pace, skipping Secret Wars 2, and suddenly Magneto is eating breakfast with the X-Men. I would want to show how this is a big deal to the other X-Men. Even though there's about 20 issues between between Rogue joining the team and Magneto officially being an ally to the X-Men, you could say these two are coming in kind of close together. Storm will threaten to leave the X-Men if Xavier allows 2 known terrorists into their home. Xavier says, "That's fine, I don't want you to leave, but I cannot pick and choose who I help." There's a lot of grousing while everyone is individually deciding what they want to do, and debating with each other. Nightcrawler would definitely see where Xavier is coming from, and would be the least upset about this. Magneto meets Kitty, and she's a little standoffish. After all, he did almost kill her once, but he sees the Star of David necklace she wears, and he shows her his tattoo from Auschwitz. Then it's just a silent scene. Kitty tears up because she's already seen glimpses of a future where this happens to mutants, and in that future, Magneto was the leader of the X-Men. She never understood that, but now she sees why Magneto did everything he did, and she may even be the voice of reason that convinces everyone else that they need to give Magneto and Rogue a chance. Movie 6. Professor Xavier had a near-death experience, and his Space Queen girlfriend took him with her to heal him, and the Stargates got destroyed, so he's probably never going to see any of his X-Men again. And before Xavier left, he put Magneto in charge of the school. Magneto doesn't like this. He sees himself more as somebody who should be on the front lines, but if Xavier believed in him, he doesn't want to throw that away. This one would be from Storm's point of view. We would have to change the timeline quite a bit to make some of this work, but the government is seriously considering a Mutant Registration Act to keep tabs on mutants. Kitty warns them this is step 1 to the Days of Future Past. Storm believes she needs to take the X-Men away from the school, partly to more directly tackle the problems mutants now face, and because she knows they are going to be vilified even more for their actions. It will be safer for the school and the New Mutants if the X-Men aren't around. While I wouldn't use the word terrorist, they would be doing a lot of guerrilla tactics to combat the government's stance on mutants. There's one issue from before Rogue joined the team where they infiltrate the Pentagon to erase the government's files on the X-Men. We could see something like that here. Magneto sees registration as not all that different from the lead up to the Holocaust, so if the X-Men are going to be fighting this, he wants to be there with them. But Storm says the school is still just as necessary as it was before, and the school needs a headmaster. Magneto argues that Storm is much better with children than he is, and maybe she should stay at the school. But she says these are the paths we have found ourselves on. I think this is where we are meant to be. Magneto reluctantly agrees, and the superhero plot of this one would be the mutant massacre. Even though Storm would love to be the mother hen to a new group of mutants, and Magneto would love to hit the open road and tear some stuff up, they both really shine in the roles they serve now. Storm takes the fight to the Marauders who decimated the Morlocks, and Magneto is able to run the school like a wartime hospital, saving who knows how many lives. The movie ends with Magneto and Storm respectfully parting ways, wishing each other luck in where life takes them. Movie 7, The Fall of the Mutants, which would be super tricky because that was 3 separate interweaving stories in the comics, and I'm mostly trying to focus on the X-Men here, so we wouldn't be doing the death of Doug Ramsey or Apocalypse's first tango with X-Factor. In this hypothetical, Jean never came back to life, and Scott had his happily ever after with Lee Forrester, or a pilot working for his grandparents who just happens to look a lot like Jean. Super healthy, emotionally speaking. In this universe, Doug Ramsey doesn't die. Since Colossus left the X-Men after the Brood Saga, Illyana wasn't hanging out with the X-Men on Magneto's island, and doesn't get lured into hell by Belasco, and doesn't become a scary sorceress, and doesn't cause part of the Inferno. To make a long story short, too late, this one deals with an ancient demon who tries to come to Earth, and Forge has to team up with the X-Men and Mystique's Freedom Force to stop it. I'd want to return to this idea that maybe we don't have to keep being X-Men. We're considered enemies of the state. Everything we do backfires on us and has negative ramifications. Why can't Forge and Freedom Force take care of this demon, and we can just go our separate ways? I'd want Forge to be the focal character here. Not just because the demon is his big bad from when he was in Vietnam, but he could be the one to objectively say the X-Men have done a lot of good, and if it wasn't for them, the universe would be screwed over a couple of times over. He regrets his part in the government's war on mutants, and even though he intends to spend the rest of his life atoning for what he's done, he's glad the X-Men have been there to protect the innocents from his actions. Pep Talk successful, the X-Men team up with Forge, and to balance out the way he summoned the demon back in the day, they have to sacrifice their lives to defeat it. Then Roma, goddess of something from somewhere, gives the X-Men a get-out-of-jail-free card on their sacrifice. But the X-Men agree that they want the world to think they are dead so they can continue their hit-and-run tactics with an advantage. Movie 8. The X-Men have been hiding out in Australia for a while, but their days of keeping a low profile has come to an end. The Reavers find the X-Men and prove to be a serious match. Instead of them looking like the Wheelers from Return to Oz, I would want them to basically be Bastion's Omega Sentinels from the Operation Zero Tolerance storyline. The Reavers are working with Donald Pierce, former Hellfire Club high roller, but these guys look normal with high-level Sentinel tech powering them. The opening of the movie is the Reavers obliterating the X-Men's home, and they have to climb into the Siege Perilous to escape. Roma gave it to them to use since they are choosing to live their second life by helping others, but as the X-Men climb into it, it gives them a new life divorced from their old ones. Dazzler gets to be the famous rock star she's always wanted to be. Longshot is a well-loved movie star. Rogue is in the Savage Land with all the stolen memories that have been stuck in her head finally gone. This one would follow Wolverine, who was captured and crucified before Logan could make it to the Siege Perilous. We get to see how Xavier's dream affects the individual again, and how that individual takes the dream to the rest of the world. Although Logan's always been a loudmouth who doesn't get along with anybody, he does see the X-Men as his family, and Xavier saw through some awful stuff he's done and offered him a home and a family. Now Logan wants to return the favor. He's trying to get the band back together, but he reaches a moral conundrum. If Nightcrawler is truly happy as the priest to a small orphanage in Munich, what right does Logan have to take his happiness away for the sake of the X-Men and maybe the rest of the world? This one would be a lot of wrestling with those moral questions, and him finding each X-Man in weird, unusual circumstances and wondering if he should move on to the next one. He's joined by Jubilee, who saved his life, and Psylocke, reborn as an assassin for the Hand, but remembering bits of her old life after she almost killed Logan. By the end of the movie, Logan has, air quotes, rescued some of the X-Men, but left some of them to their new lives where he believes they can still do some good, even away from the X-Men. Movie 9. Claremont ended his run with Magneto returning to being a villain, and X-Factor and the X-Men reuniting, but I don't want Magneto to go back to being a villain. And as per the Grand Design books reducing the roles of the New Mutants and X-Factor, focusing much more on the X-Men, I didn't have X-Factor form in this hypothetical, so I opted for something different. This would be a cross with Xavier's vision of the future in the last episode of X-Men Evolution, and the final issue of Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men. This movie would be set many years later, not more than a decade, but it's been some time. We start with Rogue writing a letter to Mystique, letting her know how good things are going at the mansion. The X-Men who left the school a few movies ago have returned because the dangers Storm felt the X-Men needed to tackle have kind of reduced over the years. There's always going to be your Senator Kellys trying to get a Mutant Registration Act going, but the X-Men has had such a positive impact on the world that they find it is now plausible to act within the system and protect their own in a less illegal way. Rogue is now helping teach the latest class of kids at Xavier's. This could be the Generation X kids, which is kind of cheating since this prompt specifically mentioned Grand Design and the Claremont era, and Generation X falls outside of both of those, but this kind of evolved into its own thing, so Generation X it is. And Mystique is now the M, James Bond M, not Monet St. Croix M, to the new Freedom Force team led by Forge. Magneto is still running the school, though it runs so smoothly he's basically just a figurehead these days. With how well the school is running without him having to do much, Magneto is considering building another branch of the school, maybe on Muir Island. In between movies, the X-Men helped tear down the corrupt Genosian government built on mutant slave labor, so now the United Nations is trying to rebuild, and some of the X-Men are over there helping. Probably Storm and some of the New Mutants who graduated. I'm not sure how old Kitty Pryde would be by this point, or how much time would have passed since her introduction in movie 3, but she is considering going into politics. Senator Kelly has softened on the mutant issue now, and is even kind of on good terms with the X-Men, so Kitty is interning in his campaign to build a better future for mutants and humans. Kitty was a senator in X-Men The End, so this is a callback to that. In between movies, a new member has joined, Lucas Bishop, from the dark future we've been hinting at since movie 3. Grand Design combined the Bishop future with the Days of Future Past, which is probably a good move, so you don't have half a dozen possible dark futures for the X-Men to be navigating around. While things are looking better than they ever did before, Bishop is always cautioning the X-Men that they need better defenses around the school, they need to train better, stuff like that. The X-Men are firm that this is a school, and the students may not want to be soldiers, but the adult X-Men agree with the motto from the Thomas Jane Punisher movie: if you want peace, prepare for war. The X-Men are keeping vigilant, knowing that not every problem can be solved with discourse. This movie would show how much things have changed while also kind of staying the same. We'll see characters like Wolverine are much more zen now than he used to be, and Magneto is maybe looking to him to head up the school while Magneto tries setting up their sister location overseas. The plot of this one would see a new group of mutant freedom fighters / terrorists called the Acolytes, calling on Magneto as their patron as they make some noise. These guys are Genosians, and in the aftermath of the old Genosian government falling apart, mutants are ready to let their voices be heard, no matter who gets hurt in the process. Magneto has a chat with Fabian Cortez, the leader of this band, and tells him, yeah, some humans messed up pretty bad in running Genosha, but now other humans are working to fix the problem. And he points out that mutants retaliating against humans often only breeds more hostility from the other side. If Magneto hadn't been so revolutionary when he was younger, the government might not have tried to get the Mutant Registration Act into effect. Cortez and his followers are at first angry at Magneto for selling out, but his words make sense, and the movie ends with Magneto and Cortez shaking hands, with Cortez offering to help the X-Men who are at Genosha to build a better world for humans and mutants alike. I don't know if this kind of thing would really work with the emphasis on character over a lot of the action stuff that a lot of people seem to enjoy, but I think this is what made the X-Men special for so many years, and I think it would be really cool to see someone try to implement this on screen. And also, giving the X-Men a happy ending, I think would be really fun to see as well. I hope you guys liked this one, and if you did, I'll see you guys in the future with something else. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.